All right, this is Tara. We're broadcasting live from Rib Mountain. I'm set up at a separate workstation here, so you may be seeing a little bit of hubbub going on here. And so if you're joining us live in the webinar, thanks for holding tight. And there's always unpredictable things when we're out in nature and trying to get cell signal and trying to get these things rolling here for you. So we'll have Matt here in a moment. Looks like I'm in my disguise device or outfit, doesn't it? So, all right, I see a few of you here. Really good to see you. We're going to try to take questions. Well, we can't really take questions because Matt is in a different location. So I'm going to roll it over to him just in case that they're already getting started.
See her? Okay. We should be live now. Okay. Well, hello, my friends. This is Wood Mountain State Park on top of Wood Mountain near Wausau, Wisconsin. And this is the only mountain in central southern Wisconsin. There are a few along Lake Superior, Southern Shore, but it's the only one. It's almost 2,000 feet high. So this is pretty impressive for us Midwesterners. But this is the site of my mountaintop experience when I was a child. And we loaded up on the train in Minnesota and Minneapolis to go on a journey. That was a great adventure to Wausau, Wisconsin here. And we had Northern Half Yearly Meeting, which is the half-yearly meeting of Quakers or the Society of Friends. We both right number thereof. And we met down in the marathon, and then we came up here with our Sunday school teacher, or first day school teacher, Francis Hole, and he was a soil science professor from the University of Wisconsin, very highly esteemed there for soil science on him later on. But at any rate, he wasn't into that. He was just telling us. He was telling us about the mountain, and this mountain is an ancient volcano that's slowly over billions of years creeping upwards, but it never reaches the top, and the land gets it's kind of like a slow growing pimple, and the land slowly gets sanded down by this. Actually sits on top of the whole of Wisconsin. This is the geographical underpinning of Wisconsin, as he said, or geological underpinning of all of Wisconsin, he said. He was a soil science professor. And from Minneapolis on, you see the changes of the rock as slowly you get here and you go through these layers that have been pressed upward until you get to volcanic rock here, basalt and so on. Okay, so, or basalt, I guess, from the bottom of the ocean. There's still not the volcano erupting. Well, we learned all that from Francis, but he was full of joy, and he would jump from rock to rock, and I don't know, these are not the rocks he jumped from. These are a bit too athletic, but I remember, and I don't know if this is really true that he was jumping from rock to rock, but that's the way I remember it. And so it was like, he was full of joy, and this feeling just emanated out of him. Nature is alive. Nature is alive. And I just felt that so as a truism, and it sank down into me, and I knew it was true. I knew I had to believe it, or I would never be allowed to experience a spiritual truth again. I even knew it was a spiritual truth. You know, I was raised a Quaker, so we were taught to believe in the inner experience. And I guess that was my first one. So I knew I had to believe, so that was the spiritual side of the experience. And I experienced the living nature. Nature is alive, nature is alive. And it was like the soul of the whole world, the soul of nature. And it was an actual person. It was a woman, of course, a female. It was the spirit of the earth. It was the soul of the earth, Mother Nature, so to speak. And I just knew she was a real being. And I don't know if it was that day or fairly promptly after that, I realized that we are all connected, like the Lakota saying, we are all related, that if you hurt someone, it would come back to you because our soul is all one soul. It's all the world soul. So that came clear to me, and so the law of karma I believed in from that young age, and the sacredness of the earth. And I remembered when I learned that the Native American people always asked permission to do any major project for the earth. I thought, well, of course, yeah, it's a living being. That's what you should do. So that was my mountaintop experience, and it was on a mountain. And I do believe, I would be sure that Rib Mountain was originally a vision questing mountain for the Native people in this area, which would have been the Menominee, the Ojibwe, the whole chunk, or Winnebago, and the Asante or Eastern Dakota people, and if not several others. And it was, however, the place from which everybody took like a compass reading. For miles around, you could see it. So it was the place that led you. So that's why I believe it was also probably a vision questing place. And the name in Ojibwe actually was Rib, refers to the rib, the hill being a rib. It's more of a cone, though. There's beautiful crystal, black crystal underneath this. And so we went home. It was a beautiful experience. It just stuck with me, and it completely changed my life. And I became an herbalist because of that. That was age 10 or 11. At age 13, I read the Teachings of Don Juan. It came out that summer, 67. And I realized that plants were reference points for consciousness. They were reference points for knowledge. They were more reliable than a human teacher. And because we're changing all the time. And they would be medicinal on the spiritual lesson level, on the psychological level, mind, emotions, finally on the physical level. 4 different levels there. And that was something I realized when I was 14, 15. And then the knowledge of the archetype, the knowledge of the specific essence in that plant was something I sought. And there wasn't, so I studied herb books. I couldn't understand them because they didn't think that way. Later I would run across homeopathy, and they did think that way, so I did study. That was a detour for me. I studied homeopathy for a while. I still know a lot of homeopathy. And then when I was 18, I was in a botany class, field botany, with Dr. Lawrence in spring of 73, maybe. And Dr. Lawrence was he was a very profound botanist. He taught field botany, or plant communities. He taught us, look for the tree, and then you know what's underneath, because that's that community. I talked to a Native American herbalist. He said exactly the same thing. I was taught, look for the tree, and then the shrub, and then the herb. And that's exactly what I was taught. And but Dr. Lawrence, we had to do a report on a plant, and I picked the bur oak, my favorite tree, my favorite plant, and I did a report on that. And I was not a very good speaker then. I could go into that as well. So he said, well, you're not a very good speaker, so you get a B on your oral presentation, but you really know the essence of that plant. He didn't use the word essence, but it was like, I kind of stopped and was startled, like, wow, he thinks that way? You really understand the inner nature of that plant, whatever he said. And it was like, it was nice to get confirmation. I mean, a lot of what I reported and knew of the inner essence of that plant was from what he had taught me, but I put it all together to really capture the essence of that plant, which is very Saturnian. It grows slowly. It's twice as much roots under the ground as above. It's like carefully getting itself established. The forest fires burn and burn and burn, and it burns if it's free of forest fires for 13 years, then finally it's big enough and the bark is thick and hard enough to keep the fire out, and it starts growing, and then you get those scattered. That's what you get, a tree on a savanna. That too is very Saturnian, that careful, slow growth. And so we use the white oak instead of the bur oak, but so closely related. I started using burro because I just ran out of the white oak tincture recently. But very good herb, astringent, very strong. So that was another teacher. And finally, when I was about 31, my mother bought a car from her cousin in Milwaukee, and we drove. And so she needed somebody to drive her car back when she went to pick that up, and that gave me a chance to go to Madison here. And I didn't travel in those days. Now I do all the time. But I called ahead, I called to Francis, and I came to visit him at his house in near the Yahara River in Madison, on the isthmus, as they call it, the spit of land between the two lakes. And I revisited that house recently, just a plain, ordinary house. And I set up, and he welcomed me. He was a widower by then. And I said, "Thank you, Francis, for that wonderful weekend. I learned that nature is alive, and that totally changed my life. And I just wanted to thank you for that teaching." And he didn't, he was humble. He didn't say, "Oh, yeah, that was me," and etc. He just said, that was a beautiful weekend. It really, and that was a beautiful day. And it was one of those days that's like 100% on the scale, just, we both remember that. Just, you have a few every summer. Then sometimes you have a couple dozen every summer. But, and if you're in California, you maybe have them all the time. But we remembered that so well. Then I explained how I became an herbalist to teach that through the herbalism. That was my real hidden calling, though, was to teach the nature wisdom. Nature is alive, nature is alive. And later that nature is wise, because nature is, wisdom is packed into those essences of those plants. And those essences or archetypes are knowledge of nature. That's Sophia, the wisdom, and Sophia, God's wisdom. And then there's Natura Sophia, the wisdom of nature. Well, I thanked him for teaching and told him how my life, my choice was to be an herbalist, and I was doing that. I was already doing that a little bit, and I was already working in the herb store. So I thought of myself as an herbalist. I was making my way in the world that way, a couple of years now. And, nobody but a Quaker elder would say, "You have chosen very well." People crave that inner experience, but they can't get there. And you will always be in demand, because people will always want that. I was like, whoa, who but a Quaker elder would tell a younger person that they'd chosen well to become an herbalist so they could teach nature wisdom? But Francis did. But, Francis was such a soil scientist, and I was such an herbalist. We were such fanatics that after 10, 15 minutes, we really couldn't talk about much, because he just wanted to talk about the soil, and I just wanted to talk about herbs. So we probably could have found some common ground. But at any rate, so I moved on. But that was a beautiful moment. And just to talk about Francis some, so after he retired, he'd go around the state of Wisconsin with his fiddle, and he'd sing the songs of the soil, the Antigo Sitloam song, or the songs about how the prairie, how they broke the sod and turned it over, how the land's getting thinner, the soil, and from the deep dark forests of the Native American times down to the present, how the land is eroding, and you can see the subsoil and so on. And he would speak at nursery schools and Boy Scout camps and Quaker meetings and prisons and probably farm organizations with his fiddle always singing. And he was a beloved soul. And for years, he tried to get the state of Wisconsin to adopt a state soil type. And it was always, forget it, guys. Forget it, year after year. It was finally in the 60s, 68 maybe or so, then Earth Day hit. And then the Republicans and the Democrats, who is that crazy guy? Who is that was talking about the state soil? We ought to adopt the state soil for Earth Day, because everybody wants to look good, for 0 cents. 0 cents, they can to liquid on Earth. So they adopted the Antigo cellworm as the state soil. And of course, he had it all thought out. That was to him the characteristic soil of Wisconsin. And I had an herb student 3 years ago who was from Antigo, so that was kind of cute. And so so Wisconsin may be the only state that has a state silt, a state soil. And siltworms are mighty nice soils. Okay, so he died about 10 years ago, 8 years ago now, at a good age in his 80s. And there may be a website about him, but because on there I read, or maybe it was just a memorial, I hope it's still there, but because he affected so many people, he said, and he was clearly a trance medium, somebody who can feel other people's feelings. And so indeed, he could feel that nature was alive. He knew it as well as I did. He taught me that, and of course he knew it. But he said, I learned about divine love bouncing on my grandmother's knee when I was 2 years old. And another thing he said, he went to Georgetown boys' school, it would have been then, but Georgetown school, Quaker Friends School in Westchester or Chester, Pennsylvania, which is where all the Quaker youth go that their parents really want them to get a Quaker education. Nowadays, rich people send their kids there too, but if you're Quaker, you can go for free. I mean, not for free, but you can at least get in. And he went to Georgetown, and my great-grandfather went there. My great-grandfather got kicked out for joining the Civil War. He ran off with one of the schoolmasters and several of the boys when we marched up into Pennsylvania. They just couldn't stand it, and he actually managed to get all the way from suburban Philadelphia today. Well, it's not that far, but for a 17-year-old boy, it was all the way to Gettysburg, and he signed up. He was in the Army for 2 days, and then his father came and paid $100 to buy an exemption, someone else to be exempt to serve for him. And he took him by the ear, and he got thrown out of school, and it was a great family embarrassment. But he went to Georgetown until then. So, but Francis told the story that there was a famous headmaster of the school named William Worcester Comfort, kind of the Albus Dumbledore of Georgetown. And he never spoke in Quaker meeting, silent Quaker meeting, but Francis said he just emanated the verities of education, just the things, the beauties, the wonders, the truths of what you're trying to learn as a student. Like, wow, like what a way to learn. That is indeed the Quaker Hogwarts there. So that was just a few of the things about Francis. And he also had a campaign. He didn't like he wanted to change the name of soil because it's related to soiled and dirt and things like that. And he said, but it's wonderful, it's sacred, and it's dark. And in the darkness, our inner life starts, because we close our eyes from the outer light and we see the darkness within, and that's where our spiritual life starts. I was like, wow. So that was Francis. God bless him. May he rest in peace and go on to do his additional work on the other side. And since that time, I've been an herbalist and teaching here and there nature wisdom. Passed it on to a few students who remarked to me and probably perhaps helped others. And just, if nothing else, reinforced other people that needed, maybe people hadn't, society doesn't reinforce them. I'll mention here too the experience of my friend Susan. We compared notes, and she said, yes, when I was 13, I was bouncing down the steps and I felt joy. And I knew, all of a sudden I knew nature is alive. Oh, and she's got a different personality. Oh, nature's alive. And then she said, I'm a tester. So I saw a squirrel on the sidewalk, and I said, if that squirrel doesn't run away, but I can walk right up to it, then I'll know that this is real, that nature really is alive. And so she walked up right to it, and it just stayed there and looked at her. And then she went her way, and she knew that nature was alive. So again, in her way, that was the truth. So you got to accept. There's both to know that you feel it, and then you know it's a spiritual truth. So there's two levels: the soul experience and the the spirit, the spiritual truth experience. So I will talk another time about the seven stages, 7 steps on the Jacob's ladder, the shamanic ladder, or on the spiritual path that I talked about in the 7 Herbs book, and how that came to me. And that was initiation. And to my mind, that was a fulfillment of the nature as alive. That was nature in her 7-fold aspect, teaching me, so that completing that lesson. And we'll talk about that again another time. But we thought we're right across the little road here from some herbs, including the rather sensational furzy wood, plus goldenrod, which just came into flower the last 3 days or so. So we're going to talk about goldenrod and some other herbs and do a little herb walk. This may be edited out of our final production, but those of you watching right now get the advantage of seeing a live herb walk. And
thanks for joining us. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our website at matthewwoodinstituteofherbalism.com. You can find all of our social links in the description below. Also, please subscribe to our channel so you can keep up with the latest videos.